without even looking at the second page. 5 years of exceptional performance reviews, 3 major project completions ahead of schedule, and countless late nights, all dismissed with a wave of his manicured hand. I sat there, the air suddenly thin in my lungs. The orchid on his desk seemed to mock me with its perfect symmetry. But the quarterly reports show my team outperformed every... The decision is final. He checked his watch. We're done here. I gathered my papers with steady hands, refusing to let him see how deeply his dismissal cut. As I reached the door, he added, "Remember, there are 20 candidates who would take your position tomorrow if given the chance." 3 days later, I was enjoying a rare, quiet dinner at Castellano's, a small Italian bistro downtown. I had just ordered my meal when a child's voice pierced the restaurant's gentle hum. "Miss Thea, Miss Thea." The sound of my name in that particular voice sent an electric current down my spine. Before I could fully process it, a small body crashed into my side, small arms wrapping around my waist with the unrestrained enthusiasm only children possess. "Everett?" I whispered, looking down at the mop of curly hair I would recognize anywhere. I glanced up and locked eyes with Preston across the restaurant. His fork clattered against fine china, his face draining of color as recognition dawned. Beside him, his wife Olivia turned, confusion morphing into sharp suspicion. "Who is she?" I could read her lips forming the question, though I couldn't hear her words. Time suspended between us, boss and employee, past and present, lies and truth, all converging in the innocent excitement of a 7-year-old boy. Before I continue with what happened next, I want to thank you for listening to our stories. Many people hear these tales of workplace revenge, but forget to hit that like button or subscribe. If you're enjoying this story of how my boss's dismissive words came back to haunt him, make sure you follow for more incredible true accounts of people standing up for themselves when others try to push them down. Now, let me tell you who I am and how I ended up in this impossible situation. My name is Thea Lockland. 6 years before that moment in Preston's office, I wasn't a corporate employee. I was a doctoral candidate in developmental psychology at Westfield University. My dissertation focused on attachment patterns in early childhood, specifically how consistent caregiving affects cognitive and emotional development. I needed a primary research subject, and through my academic advisor, I found the perfect opportunity: a wealthy family seeking a live-in nanny for their newborn son. The position would allow me to conduct my research while earning enough to support myself through my studies. The family would benefit from having a highly qualified caregiver with specialized knowledge of child development. When I first met Preston and Olivia, they were both ambitious executives building their careers. They lived in a stunning contemporary home with walls of glass overlooking the city. They spoke about their new baby, Everett, as though he were another achievement to be managed alongside their professional accomplishments. "We need someone who can provide structure," Olivia had explained during my interview. "Our schedules are unpredictable, but Everett's shouldn't be." I moved into the garden-level suite of their home when Everett was just 3 months old. For the next 3 years, I became his primary caregiver while meticulously documenting his developmental milestones for my research. I bathed him, fed him, sang him to sleep, taught him his first words, and comforted him when he woke crying in the night. Preston and Olivia weren't neglectful parents. Not exactly. They loved their son in their way, but they viewed parenting through the lens of efficiency. They scheduled quality time with Everett like business appointments. Preston would sometimes cancel at the last minute when work demanded his attention, which was often. "He won't remember anyway," Preston would say when I expressed concern about their absences. "That's why we have you." And so Everett and I developed our own world. We had secret games, special songs, and a treasure map I helped him create that we painted on the ceiling above his bed so he could find imaginary treasures while falling asleep. I taught him a special handshake that always ended with both of us making elephant sounds, a private joke that never failed to make him giggle uncontrollably. When my research period ended and I completed my dissertation, leaving that home was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. Everett was 4 by then, old enough to understand I was leaving, but too young to fully comprehend why his Miss Thea wouldn't be there every morning when he woke up. "I'll still see you sometimes," I promised him, though I wasn't sure how that would work in practice. And you'll always be my favorite researcher assistant. After earning my doctorate, I faced the harsh reality many academics discover: a PhD doesn't guarantee financial stability. With substantial student loans and a competitive job market in academia, I needed to pivot. I accepted a position in organizational behavior at a corporate consulting firm, using my research skills in a more lucrative field. 2 years into my corporate career, the company announced it had been acquired by a larger conglomerate. We were assured our positions were secure, but management would be restructured. I didn't connect the dots until orientation day with our new executive team, when Preston walked onto the stage as our division president. He didn't recognize me. Why would he? The sleep-deprived graduate student in comfortable clothes who had cared for his son had transformed into a polished professional. I'd lost weight from stress during my final academic year, cut my long hair into a sleek bob, and started using my formal name professionally. To him, I was just another employee, one of many faces in a corporate headcount. I considered resigning immediately, but my student loans weren't going to pay themselves. Besides, Preston worked primarily from the executive offices in another building. Our paths rarely crossed, and when they did, he showed no sign of recognition. For 3 years, I excelled in my position, earning promotions and building a reputation for exceptional work. Then came the reorganization that placed me directly under Preston's management. Suddenly, I was reporting to the man whose son still appeared in my dreams, whose house I had lived in, whose family life I had documented in academic detail. Still, he never made the connection. Until that day in his office when he called me just a number. Until that night in the restaurant when his son crashed into my side, face alight with recognition and joy. "Miss Thea taught me how to read," Everett was exclaiming to his mother as Preston approached our table with measured steps. "She knows about the stars on my ceiling and the treasure map. We have a special handshake with elephant noises." "Elephant noises?" Olivia repeated, her gaze shifting between her son and me with increasing intensity. "It's been a while," I said softly, standing to face them both. "Everett has grown so much." Preston cleared his throat. "Thea was a babysitter we hired for a short time when Everett was very small." The lie hung between us as Everett shook his head vigorously. "Not a babysitter. Miss Thea lived with us. She was there every morning and every night. She made my lunches and read 3 books at bedtime and knew exactly how to check for monsters." Olivia's expression hardened. "You told me your mother watched him during that period." "My mother helped occasionally," Preston said, a muscle twitching near his temple. "Thea was temporary household help." 3 years isn't temporary," I corrected gently. "And I wasn't just household help, as you well know." 3 years? Olivia repeated, her voice rising slightly. "Preston, what is she talking about?" The restaurant seemed to grow quieter around us, other diners sensing the tension radiating from our unexpected reunion. Everett, oblivious to the adult undercurrents, tugged at my hand. "Do you still have our picture book? The one with all the leaves we collected at the park?" "I do," I answered truthfully, my heart aching at the memory of our nature scrapbook. "I've kept everything." "Perhaps we should discuss this elsewhere," Preston suggested, his corporate mask slipping to reveal naked anxiety. "Thea, I had no idea you were, that you had been, that I had been the primary caregiver for your son during his formative years." I finished for him. The person who documented his first steps, first words, and first full night of sleep. The researcher whose work on your son earned me a doctorate in developmental psychology? That Thea? The color drained from Olivia's face. "Researcher? Preston, what is happening right now?" I knelt to Everett's level, not wanting him to witness the adult tension building around him. "It's wonderful to see you, buddy. You've grown so tall and handsome. Maybe we can catch up another time when it's better for everyone." His face fell. "But I just found you again." "I know," I said, touching his cheek gently. "And I'm not disappearing, I promise." As I straightened up, Preston stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Thea, I think we need to talk privately about your position with the company." The threat was implicit but clear. My job was suddenly in jeopardy. "Actually," I replied, keeping my voice steady, I think what we need to discuss is the remarkable coincidence that led me to work for the same man whose son was the subject of my doctoral research. The research that your company now owns the rights to under our intellectual property agreement. Preston's eyes widened slightly as he processed my words. He hadn't just hired a former nanny, he'd hired the researcher whose work his company now controlled. "We'll be in touch," he said finally, placing a hand on his wife's back to guide her away. "Everett, say goodbye, we're leaving." "But Dad—" "Now, Everett." I watched them go, Everett twisting to wave at me until they turned the corner. My dinner sat forgotten, growing cold as I considered what had just happened and what it meant for my future. The following Monday, an urgent meeting request from Preston awaited me when I arrived at work. The subject line read simply, "Discussion of recent events." When I entered his office, he was standing by the window rather than seated behind his desk, a strategic choice to appear less confrontational. "Thea," he began, turning to face me, "I've reviewed your personnel file and realized I may have been hasty in our last meeting. Your contributions to the company have been significant." "How interesting that you discovered this after seeing me with your son," I remarked, remaining standing though he gestured toward a chair. "The timing is unfortunate," he conceded, "but I've reconsidered your raise request. In fact, I'd like to offer you the full amount plus a retention bonus if we can put this awkward situation behind us." "By awkward situation, you mean the fact that you didn't recognize the woman who raised your son for 3 years? Or the fact that you lied to your wife about who was caring for him?" His professional demeanor cracked slightly. "That's a personal matter." "No, Preston. That's where you're wrong. You made it professional when you dismissed me as just a number, despite knowing nothing about me or my qualifications. You made it professional when you threatened my position after our encounter at the restaurant." "I never threatened." "You didn't have to say the words. We both know what you meant." I took a deep breath. "I'm not interested in special treatment. I want what I've earned through my work here, nothing more." He nodded, relief washing over his features. "Of course. The raise is approved, effective immediately. I trust we can maintain a professional relationship moving forward." "Absolutely," I agreed. "I've always been professional." As I turned to leave, he added, "Thea, about Everett, I'd appreciate your discretion. Olivia and I have some things to work through." I paused at the door. "Your family dynamics aren't my concern, Preston. But I won't lie if Everett reaches out to me again. He deserves better than that." The weeks that followed were a strange dance of avoidance and careful observation. Preston kept his distance professionally, approving my projects without the scrutiny he'd applied before. Occasionally, I'd catch him watching me during meetings with an unreadable expression. Then came the email that changed everything. The company had announced a major initiative focused on employee wellness and work-life balance, a corporate response to increasing turnover rates. Each department would present their vision for implementation at the annual company-wide conference, with the CEO selecting one approach to be adopted company-wide. The winning department would receive substantial additional funding, and its leader would join the executive committee. It was the kind of opportunity that defined careers. I knew immediately what I had to do. While Preston focused on productivity metrics and cost-benefit analyses for his presentation, I began crafting something entirely different. I dove into my doctoral research, anonymizing the data but preserving the powerful narrative of how consistent nurturing creates measurable developmental advantages. The night before the conference, I received a text from an unknown number. "Miss Thea, this is Everett. Mom got your number from Dad's phone. Can we talk sometime? I miss you." My heart twisted in my chest. After all these years, he still remembered me, still wanted me in his life. I responded carefully. "I miss you too, Everett. Let's ask your parents about setting up a proper time to catch up." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared. "Mom is mad at Dad about you. She says he lied about everything." I stared at my phone, unsure how to respond to this glimpse into their family turmoil. Before I could decide, another message came through. "I told Mom you were the best, that you never forgot my birthday like Dad sometimes did, that you knew all my favorite things." The stakes had just gotten higher. Tomorrow I would present in front of the entire company, including Preston. And now I knew his marriage was strained because of the truths that had emerged about his parenting choices. I had a decision to make: proceed with my plan or back away from the potential damage it might cause. As I prepared for the conference the next morning, Everett's messages weighed on me. Was I crossing a line by using my research in this presentation, even in anonymized form? Or was I simply standing up for myself and the work I had dedicated years of my life to completing? I chose a simple black dress and arrived early to check the audiovisual equipment. Executives and department heads filled the front rows. Preston sat beside the CEO, scrolling through his presentation notes with intense focus. He didn't look up when I entered. The conference began with standard corporate fanfare, quarterly results, market projections, and strategic objectives. Then came the departmental presentations on employee wellness initiatives. One after another, managers offered variations on the same tired ideas: gym memberships, mindfulness apps, and occasional work-from-home days. When Preston took the stage, he spoke confidently about optimizing human resources and balancing output expectations against burnout thresholds. He presented employees as assets to be managed efficiently, their well-being important only as it affected productivity. The data indicates that modest investments in wellness programs yield a 16% reduction in absenteeism, he explained, flipping through slides of graphs and charts. By treating these interventions as performance enhancers rather than employee benefits, we maximize return on investment. The audience responded with polite applause. The CEO nodded appreciatively at the financial focus. Preston caught my eye as he returned to his seat, a slight smile suggesting he believed his presentation had secured the win. Then it was my turn. "Good morning," I began, standing before the assembled company without slides. "I'd like to start by asking you all a question. When was the last time you felt truly valued? Not for what you produced, but for who you are?" The room grew quiet. For the past 5 years, I've worked in this company analyzing behavioral patterns and organizational dynamics. But before that, I spent 3 years conducting doctoral research on human development and attachment theory. What I discovered then is directly relevant to what we're discussing today. I activated my first slide, a simple graph showing developmental milestones charted against different caregiving approaches. This represents data from a longitudinal study on childhood development. The blue line shows a child with consistent, attentive caregiving. The red line shows periods when that same child experienced significant caregiver absence or inconsistency. The difference between the lines was dramatic, with clear developmental advantages corresponding to periods of consistent care. "You'll notice something remarkable," I continued. "When children receive regular, meaningful attention, they don't just develop cognitive skills faster, they develop resilience, creativity, and problem-solving abilities that persist long after the observation period." I clicked to the next slide, a split screen showing workplace metrics. Now look at this data from our own company. When employees experience consistent recognition and meaningful engagement from leadership, we see the same pattern: increased innovation, stronger loyalty, and greater resilience during challenging periods. From the corner of my eye, I noticed Preston shifting uncomfortably in his seat. The research is clear. Human beings never outgrow their need for meaningful connection and recognition. When we treat people as replaceable numbers, we strip away the very thing that drives exceptional performance, the sense that who they are matters as much as what they do. For the next 15 minutes, I presented a vision of workplace culture built on the same principles that help children thrive: consistency, authentic recognition, and genuine investment in development. I never mentioned Preston or Everett by name, but the parallels to my research were unmistakable to anyone who knew the truth. "In conclusion," I said, meeting the CEO's gaze directly, "we can continue seeing employees as interchangeable resources to be optimized, or we can recognize them as irreplaceable individuals whose unique contributions create our competitive advantage. The science is clear about which approach yields better long-term results." The room erupted in applause, not the polite, obligatory kind that had followed other presentations, but enthusiastic, extended clapping. People were standing. The CEO was nodding thoughtfully, making notes. As I returned to my seat, I caught Preston's expression, a complex mixture of recognition, anger, and something else. Fear, perhaps. He now understood exactly who I was and what I knew. The CEO approached the podium as the applause faded. Thank you all for these thoughtful presentations. While we have much to consider, I must say that Thea's approach resonates strongly with the direction our board has been discussing. The connection between developmental psychology and workplace dynamics is fascinating and offers us a unique opportunity to differentiate our company culture. Preston's face remained carefully neutral, but his knuckles whitened as he gripped his tablet. I'd like to invite Thea to expand her presentation into a formal proposal for a new department focused on employee development and organizational culture. The CEO continued. This initiative will report directly to me as we consider making it a cornerstone of our corporate identity moving forward. The meeting concluded with logistics announcements, but the buzz in the room centered on my presentation. Colleagues stopped to congratulate me, while Preston slipped out a side door without speaking to anyone. That afternoon, I received an email from the CEO's assistant scheduling a private meeting for the following day. I also received another text from Everett. Dad was really quiet at breakfast today. Mom asked if he was worried about some presentation. Are you giving a presentation, Miss Thea? I stared at my phone, wondering how much this perceptive child understood about the adult dynamics swirling around him. Before I could respond, another message appeared. Can I tell you a secret? I found your old notebook in Dad's office. The one with all the pictures of me learning things. Why does Dad have it? My heart raced. My research journal, containing observations, developmental notes, and documentation of Everett's milestones, should have left with me when I completed my dissertation. I had assumed Preston and Olivia had discarded any remaining materials after I left. Why would Preston have kept it all these years? And more importantly, why would he have it in his office rather than at home? I crafted a careful response. That notebook was part of my work when I cared for you. Maybe your dad kept it as a memory of when you were little. The reply came quickly. He has lots of notebooks and files with your name on them. A chill ran through me. Files with my name? That made no sense unless Preston had recognized me long before our encounter in his office. Unless he had been tracking my career, my research, my life. The next morning, I arrived early for my meeting with the CEO, my mind still churning with questions about Preston and those files. The executive floor was quiet, most offices still dark. The CEO's assistant showed me into a conference room where he was already waiting, reviewing documents with a woman I recognized as the head of human resources. Thea, thank you for joining us, he said, standing to greet me. Your presentation yesterday has catalyzed exactly the kind of discussion we needed. I'd like to offer you the opportunity to lead our new employee development initiative. I blinked in surprise. That's incredibly flattering. It's not flattery, he corrected. It's recognition of your unique qualifications. Your background in developmental psychology, combined with your corporate experience, gives you perspective no one else here has. I appreciate that, but what exactly would this role entail? You'd build a department focused on transforming our approach to human capital, he explained, sliding a folder toward me. Competitive salary, executive status, and a direct reporting line to me. You'd also oversee the wellness programs currently under Preston's division. The HR director smiled encouragingly. We've already drafted an announcement about the reorganization. Preston has agreed to transition those teams to your leadership. Preston agreed to this? I asked, unable to mask my skepticism. The CEO and HR director exchanged glances. Let's just say Preston understands the value of being a team player right now, the CEO replied carefully. There have been some concerning patterns in his leadership approach that your presentation highlighted very effectively. I opened the folder to find not only a job description and compensation package, but also a summary of employee satisfaction surveys from Preston's division, showing consistently low scores in areas like recognition, development opportunities, and leadership trust. You wouldn't just be building something new, the HR director added. You'd be healing something broken. As I reviewed the documents, a notification appeared on my phone. Another text from Everett. Mom and Dad had a big fight about you last night. Dad said he handled it, but Mom said she talked to someone at your company who told her you've worked there for years. Why didn't Dad know who you were? The CEO noticed my expression change. Everything all right? I set my phone face down on the table. Yes, sorry, just an unexpected message. Take your time reviewing the offer, he said, standing to indicate the meeting was concluding. We'd like your decision by the end of the week, but I hope you'll accept. Your perspective is exactly what this company needs. As they left me alone with the proposal, I checked Everett's message again, along with a new one that had arrived. Dad came home with a box of stuff from his office. They're arguing about papers with your name. Mom keeps saying, "How could you not tell me?" I'm scared, Miss Thea. My chest tightened. Whatever game Preston was playing had now spilled over to affect his son, the child I had nurtured and protected for 3 formative years. This had gone too far. I texted back, "Everything will be okay, Everett. Adults sometimes have disagreements that aren't about you. You haven't done anything wrong by talking to me." His response was immediate. "Can I see you? For real, not just texts?" Before I could answer, my phone rang an unknown number. I answered cautiously. "Thea, this is Olivia. We need to talk." Her voice was tight with controlled emotion. "I think that's a good idea," I agreed, moving to a more private corner of the conference room. "Is Everett okay?" "He's with my sister," she replied. "I need to understand what's happening. Preston has been evasive. And finding your research journals with all those detailed observations of our son, hidden in his office for years." Her voice cracked slightly. "I deserve the truth." "You do," I said quietly. "When would you like to meet? Can you come to Riverbank Park in an hour? By the East Entrance fountain?" I checked my calendar, nothing that couldn't be rescheduled. "I'll be there." An hour later, I spotted Olivia sitting on a bench near the fountain, sunglasses covering her eyes despite the cloudy day. She'd aged well in the years since I'd seen her regularly. Her blonde hair now had subtle streaks of silver that suited her. "Thank you for coming," she said as I sat beside her, leaving appropriate distance between us. "Of course." She removed her sunglasses, revealing reddened eyes. "I need to understand something. You lived in our home for 3 years, caring for our son while conducting research for your dissertation, correct?" "Yes. You and Preston signed extensive consent forms. The University Ethics Board approved everything. Everett was never at risk." "I remember signing something," she acknowledged. "Preston handled most of it. I was so busy with the merger that year." "Your son was always my priority," I assured her. "The research was observational, documenting normal development and attachment patterns. Everett received excellent care." "That's becoming very clear," she said with a bitter laugh. "Apparently, he still asks about you, all these years later." I remained silent, unsure how to respond. "What I can't understand," she continued, "is why Preston pretended not to know you when you ended up working at his company. The personnel files show you've been there for 5 years. He's been your direct supervisor for 2 years." "I've been wondering the same thing," I admitted. "I assumed he simply didn't recognize me. I look different now, and I use my formal name professionally." Olivia shook her head. "That's what doesn't make sense. I found research journals in his office, journals you presumably left behind, with detailed notes about Everett's development. But I also found a file with newspaper clippings about your academic achievements, your job announcements, even a copy of your employment application from when you joined the company." My skin prickled with unease. "He's been tracking me?" "It appears so. When I confronted him, he claimed he was monitoring a potential liability, that your research on our son could somehow damage his reputation if it became public." "That's absurd," I said. "The research was conducted ethically with full consent. Everett's identity was protected in all published materials." "I know," Olivia said. "I read your dissertation last night. It's brilliant work, and nothing in it could possibly harm Everett or our family. In fact," her voice caught, "in fact, it helped me understand why my son feels like a stranger to me sometimes. You were more his parent than either of us." The pain in her voice was raw, genuine. "Olivia, you were building your career. You made choices based on what you thought was best at the time." "Choices Preston encouraged," she said sharply. "He always insisted Everett was in good hands, That quality parenting was about efficiency, not quantity of time. She laughed hollowly. Meanwhile, he was hiding the fact that our son formed his primary attachment to someone who wasn't family. We sat in silence for a moment, the fountain's gentle splashing filling the space between us. "There's something else," Olivia finally said. "After your presentation yesterday, yes, Preston told me about it. He came home agitated. He packed up all those files from his office and tried to destroy them. That's when I intercepted them." "Why would he do that?" "I think," she said carefully, "he's afraid of what you know. Not just about Everett, but about him." "What do you mean?" She hesitated. "I found financial records mixed in with your research notes. Personal accounts I never knew existed. Transactions that don't make sense for our family or his position." My mind raced, connecting scattered dots. Preston's insistence that I was just a number. His panicked reaction at the restaurant. The mysterious files tracking my career. The CEO's comment about concerning patterns in Preston's leadership. "Olivia, I think you should take those financial records to a lawyer," I said quietly, "and possibly to the company's compliance officer." "I already have," she replied, surprising me. "This morning." "What?" "I may have been an absent mother, but I'm not a fool," she said with newfound steel in her voice. "Preston has been hiding things for years, apparently including you. I needed to understand why." My phone chimed with a calendar alert, a reminder for a meeting in 30 minutes. "I need to get back to the office," I said, standing. "But thank you for reaching out. I've worried about Everett over the years." "He'd like to see you," Olivia said. "Properly this time, not just an accidental meeting in a restaurant. Would that be okay?" The question hung between us, a peace offering, a recognition, perhaps even an apology. "I'd like that very much," I answered honestly. As I walked back toward the office, another text from Everett arrived. "Mom says I can see you soon for real. Is that true?" I smiled at his enthusiasm. "Yes, it's true. I'm looking forward to it." Then I noticed an urgent email from the CEO's office requesting my immediate presence upon my return. The subject line read, "Confidential, Preston situation." When I arrived at the executive floor, security personnel were stationed outside Preston's office while 2 IT staff members worked at his computer. The CEO waved me into his private conference room where the company's legal counsel and the compliance officer were waiting. "Thea, thank you for coming so quickly," the CEO said, his expression grave. "I'll get straight to the point. We've uncovered significant financial irregularities in Preston's division. Funds misallocated, reports falsified, possibly worse." The compliance officer nodded. "We received concerning documentation this morning that corroborated suspicions we've been investigating quietly for some time." "Documentation?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "From his wife," the legal counsel confirmed, "along with a rather remarkable story about your history with their family." I took a deep breath. "I can explain." The CEO raised his hand. "No need. We've verified your employment history and academic credentials. Your transparency in yesterday's presentation about your background in developmental psychology speaks for itself. What concerns us is Preston's apparent effort to conceal your prior connection while simultaneously tracking your career. We have evidence suggesting he deliberately blocked your advancement within the company," the compliance officer added, "including documentation that your previous raise requests were approved at the division level but mysteriously denied after crossing his desk." "There's more," the legal counsel said. "Preliminary examination of his files indicates he may have been using your research, without attribution or compensation, to develop executive coaching programs he's been selling privately while employed." Here, the room seemed to spin slightly as the implications sank in. "We'll need your cooperation as this investigation proceeds," the CEO continued. "But first, I want to reaffirm our offer from this morning. The company needs your expertise now more than ever, not just for the employee development initiative, but to help repair the damage Preston may have caused." As they outlined next steps and the compliance officer scheduled a formal interview, a final text from Everett lit up my phone. "Dad just left with some men from his work. Mom is crying but says everything will be better now. When can I see you, Miss Thea?" In that moment, staring at the innocent question from a child caught in adult chaos, I realized something profound. Revenge had never been my goal. Justice had found its own path, through truth, through professional integrity, and through a child who simply remembered the person who had been there for him when it mattered most. 2 weeks later, I sat in my new corner office reviewing applications for the growing Employee Development Initiative. The glass walls offered a view of the city skyline, the same view Preston had enjoyed until recently. His name had become a whisper in the hallways. After the internal investigation confirmed financial misconduct spanning years, he had been escorted from the building. The legal team was still determining whether to pursue criminal charges. His executive biography had vanished from the company website, replaced by mine. A knock at my open door interrupted my thoughts. My assistant poked her head in. "Thea, your 3 o'clock is here." "Thank you, Natalie. Please send them in." I stood as Olivia entered, holding Everett's hand. The boy, no longer the toddler I had known, but not yet a teenager, bounced on his toes with barely contained excitement. "Miss Thea!" He broke free from his mother and rushed toward me, stopping just short of a hug, suddenly unsure. "You look different here." I smiled, crouching to his level. "Different how?" "More important," he decided, "like the grown-ups on TV who run things." I laughed. "Well, I do run things now, but I'm still the same Miss Thea who helped you look for monsters under your bed." That was all the reassurance he needed. His arms wrapped around my neck in a tight hug that transported me back to bedtime stories and midday adventures. Olivia watched our reunion with a complex expression, part guilt, part wonder, part relief. Over the past 2 weeks, we had spoken several times, rebuilding a connection that had never truly existed during my years in their home. "Thank you for making time for this," she said as Everett explored my office, examining the framed degrees on the wall with curiosity. "It means everything to him." "To me too," I admitted. "I've missed him." She nodded, her eyes following her son. "Preston's lawyer called this morning. They want to negotiate." "What does that mean exactly?" "It means he's scared," she said flatly. "The company has evidence of financial impropriety and I have." She glanced at Everett, lowering her voice. "I have documentation of other things, personal choices that would complicate his future employment prospects." I raised an eyebrow. "Affairs?" She gave a slight nod. "Among other indiscretions, he wants to trade his silence about certain company matters for our silence about his personal conduct." "Are you considering it?" "I'm considering what's best for Everett," she said, watching her son, who was now attempting to spin in my office chair. "A public scandal helps no one, but complete silence feels like letting him escape consequences." Before I could respond, my phone rang. The CEO's direct line. "I should take this," I apologized. "Of course. We'll step out for a moment." She touched Everett's shoulder. "Let's find the snack machine while Miss Thea takes her call." As they left, I answered the phone. "Thea, I've just finished a conversation with Preston's attorney," the CEO said without preamble. "They're proposing a confidential settlement." Olivia mentioned he was looking to negotiate. "This is about more than just Preston's misconduct," he continued. "It seems he's prepared to make claims about the company misusing your research, the developmental studies you conducted with his son." I gripped the edge of my desk. "That's absurd. He's the one who kept copies of my research journals and tracked my career." "We know that. But a public fight gets messy for everyone. The board is considering their offer, with conditions." "What conditions?" "That's why I'm calling. They want assurance that you're comfortable with the proposed resolution. You've become too valuable to risk alienating." The irony wasn't lost on me. 2 weeks ago, Preston had called me just a number, replaceable and insignificant. Now the company was restructuring around my expertise and making me central to settlement negotiations. "What exactly is being proposed?" I asked. "Preston resigns permanently. He receives standard severance but no bonus or stock options. He signs a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement covering both his financial misconduct and any personal matters his wife may have documentation of. In exchange, the company doesn't press charges, and we all move forward without public drama." I considered the implications. "And my research?" would be formally recognized as your intellectual property, with appropriate licensing agreements if the company continues using any aspects of it in our development programs. Plus, we'd fund a new research initiative under your leadership. After ending the call, I stood at my office window, watching the city below. People moved through their days, unaware of the power shifts and private reckonings happening in glass towers above them. Olivia and Everett returned, the boy clutching a chocolate bar. "Everything okay?" Olivia asked, noting my pensive expression. Yes, that was the CEO discussing settlement terms with Preston. Her eyes narrowed. And? They're offering a path that avoids public scandal while still ensuring consequences. I turned to face her fully. "What do you want, Olivia?" "Not what's easiest or what the lawyers recommend. What do you actually want from this situation?" She considered the question, watching Everett, who had returned to examining the certificates on my wall. "I want my son to grow up understanding that actions have consequences, but also that life is complicated," she said finally. "I want him to see that I made mistakes as a parent, but I'm trying to correct them. And she hesitated. "I want him to have you in his life, if you're willing. You were the constant he needed when neither Preston nor I could be." Her honesty caught me off guard. "Look, Miss Thea," Everett called out, pointing to a framed photograph I kept beside my degrees. "That's me." The picture showed a much younger Everett in a public garden, fascinated by a butterfly that had landed on a flower he was holding. I had taken it during one of our nature walks for my research on childhood wonder and discovery. "It is you," I confirmed, walking over to him. "That picture reminds me every day of why my work matters." He beamed with pride, then grew serious. "Mom says Dad did something bad at work. Is that why you have his office now?" Olivia and I exchanged glances, silently negotiating how to respond. "Your dad made some mistakes," I said carefully. "People sometimes do that, especially when they forget what's really important." "Like being kind?" Everett asked. "Exactly like that," I agreed, and remembering that every person matters. Later that afternoon, after Olivia and Everett had left with plans for a proper dinner together the following weekend, I received an unexpected message. Preston had requested a brief meeting before he cleared out his remaining personal items. The company's legal counsel advised against it, but something in me needed closure, not just for my professional journey, but for the years I had spent nurturing his child while he remained distant. Security escorted him to a conference room where I waited alone. He looked smaller somehow, his tailored suit no longer projecting authority but instead hanging on him like borrowed confidence. "Thank you for agreeing to see me," he said, remaining standing though I had gestured to a chair. "What can I do for you, Preston?" He placed a leather portfolio on the table between us. "These belong to you. The last of your research journals and notes that were in my possession. I've deleted all electronic copies." I made no move to take them. "Why did you keep them all these years?" He didn't answer immediately, his gaze fixed on the portfolio. "At first, it was professional interest," he finally said. "Your observations about development and motivation were insightful. I incorporated them into my management approach." "Without attribution," I noted. "Yes." He acknowledged this with a slight nod. "Later, when you joined the company, I recognized you immediately." This confirmation of what Olivia had discovered still managed to surprise me. "Yet you said nothing. For 5 years." I convinced myself it was a coincidence at first. Then I worried what might happen if people knew my son's primary attachment figure during his formative years worked under my management. It seemed complicated. "So you blocked my advancement instead." He flinched slightly. I told myself I was being objective, while calling me just a number. "That was..." He stopped, reconsidering. "I have no excuse for that. Seeing you excel despite my efforts to minimize your contributions triggered something defensive in me. Your presentation showed me exactly what I'd been denying." I studied him, this man who had held such power over my career and who had once entrusted me with his child's development while remaining absent himself. "Why are you really here, Preston? This isn't about returning research notes." He met my gaze directly for the first time. "Everett asked to see me yesterday. During our conversation, he asked why I never talked about you all these years, why I pretended not to know how important you were in his life. What did you tell him? The truth. That I was insecure about someone else having a stronger connection with my son than I did. His voice wavered slightly. That I made choices that prioritized my career over his childhood. And by the time I recognized my mistake, the damage was done. The vulnerability in his admission caught me off guard. Olivia is filing for divorce, he continued. My career is essentially over. No company will hire an executive with financial misconduct allegations, even without criminal charges. I've lost everything that once defined me. I'm sorry about your marriage, I said honestly. But the rest was your choice, Preston. Every step of the way. I know. He straightened his shoulders. I'm not asking for sympathy. I just wanted you to know that I recognize the impact of my actions on the company, on my family, and on you. You deserved better. As he turned to leave, I called after him. Preston. He paused at the door. Everett is an exceptional child with remarkable emotional intelligence. I said, don't waste whatever relationship you can still build with him. Some things can't be replaced once they're lost. A month later, I stood before a packed auditorium presenting the official launch of our company's Employee Development Initiative. The program incorporated elements of my doctoral research, while creating pathways for advancement based on individual strengths rather than standardized metrics. The CEO beamed from the front row as I outlined how our approach would differentiate us in the industry. Investors and board members nodded with approval at projected retention improvements and innovation metrics. By recognizing that each employee brings unique value that cannot be reduced to numbers on a spreadsheet, I explained, we create a culture where people invest their best selves in their work. After the presentation, during the reception, I found myself approached by a distinguished woman I recognized as the chairperson of the board. Impressive work, Thea, she said, offering her hand. Your perspective is exactly what this company needed. Thank you. That means a great deal coming from you. She smiled. I understand you have personal experience with the principles you're implementing. Something about research conducted with a child subject years ago? I tensed slightly. Yes, though those connections weren't initially apparent to everyone. Blindness comes in many forms, she remarked, especially when we're looking at people as resources rather than individuals. She sipped her champagne thoughtfully. Preston never quite grasped that distinction. Few of us do when climbing the corporate ladder, I offered diplomatically. Perhaps, but the difference is whether we learn before the fall. Her eyes twinkled with knowing wisdom. I suspect you've known that lesson longer than most of us. Later that evening, I met Olivia and Everett for our now regular Friday dinner. As Everett enthusiastically described his science project involving plant growth under different light conditions, I noticed a new lightness in Olivia's demeanor. You seem happy, I commented when Everett excused himself to examine the restaurant's fish tank. I am, she admitted. For the first time in years, the divorce proceedings are moving forward amicably. Preston has agreed to everything. The house, generous support, flexible custody arrangements. That's surprising. He's changed, she said, watching her son across the room. Or perhaps he's finding his way back to the person he was before ambition consumed him. Either way, he's making genuine efforts with Everett. I'm glad to hear that. She turned her attention back to me. What about you? The company announcement today was all over the business news. Revolutionary approach to workplace culture, they're calling it. I smiled. It's gratifying to see research that began with your son transforming an entire organization. From nanny researcher to executive suite, she mused. Quite a journey. With an unexpected detour through being just a number, I added. We both laughed at the irony. You know, Olivia said, her expression growing serious. I've been thinking about what you said about attachment and development, about how children need consistent presence more than perfect parenting. It's never too late to strengthen those bonds, I assured her. That's what I'm counting on. She glanced at Everett, now pressing his nose against the fish tank, for both Everett and Preston in different ways. 6 months later, I stood in my office reviewing the quarterly employee satisfaction reports. Every metric had improved significantly since implementing our new development initiative. Retention was up, recruitment costs were down, and innovation metrics showed remarkable growth. On my desk sat a framed note from the CEO. "You were never just a number. You were the equation we needed all along." My phone chimed with a text from Everett. "Dad helped me build a telescope. Can I show you this weekend?" As I typed my reply, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. From studying child development in Preston's home, to reshaping the corporate culture he had once dominated. From being dismissed as replaceable to becoming essential. The greatest revenge wasn't taking Preston's job or exposing his misconduct. It wasn't even the professional recognition or the vindication of my research. The true victory was in creating something positive from the experience, a workplace where people were valued for their unique contributions, a continuing relationship with Everett, and perhaps most surprisingly, a redemptive path for Preston himself, as he rebuilt his relationship with his son. I had entered Preston's office that day, seeking nothing more than fair recognition for my work. I left with a reminder that had guided my research from the beginning. Human connections matter more than any professional achievement. When we forget that truth, we risk losing everything that gives meaning to success. As I looked out over the city, where somewhere a young boy was eagerly waiting to show me his telescope, I knew I had found something better than revenge. I had found justice in its most complete form, not just consequences for past wrongs, but transformation for the future. If you've stayed with me through this journey, I want to thank you for listening to my story. So many of us have experienced being treated as just a number in our professional lives, dismissed, undervalued, or overlooked despite our contributions. I hope my experience reminds you that your unique value can never truly be diminished by someone else's failure to recognize it. If this story resonated with you, please take a moment to like and subscribe for more tales of workplace justice and personal transformation. Your support helps these important stories reach others who might be struggling with similar challenges. Remember, in a world that sometimes tries to reduce us to numbers, your individual voice and experience matter immensely. Thank you for being part of this community where we celebrate the power of human connection.